All right, it's cemented the theological rule that Ham is the true target of the curse. That's the big that's the big claim there. Okay. And I think that's why he just references it and says, "Hey, it just solidifies the claim." And when he says that, he makes it sound like there's so many quotes in here on Genesis 9 and Ham that he can't, I guess, have the time to quote even one of them to you.
It claimed that human slavery was introduced into the world solely because of Ham's specific sin against parental authority.
You haven't given us any clear evidence that you are in some kind of majority position. Early church majority position, I guess. Carite Pontes. It's Drake. We're going to continue through Dale Partridge's argument, the video Curse of Ham finally explained. I said I was going to jump around in the video and attack some of the main arguments, some of the main points, and then dissect those. I'm not going to do that. I changed my mind. I'm just going to start the video where we left off so I can, because there's a couple more church fathers I want to look at and explain, John Calvin in particular, and Dale's going to cite another work that is supposed to emphasize or agree with his argument that I also want to look at. And then we're just going to let it play, and then I'll interact. And honestly, it's just that's easier for me to do content. So we're busy men doing a sermon series through 2 Corinthians, going through Joshua on our Bible studies, and I have to keep up with my studies. I was always learning the languages. There's so much going on, and this is important. I want to interact to this because clearly this is influential in the Reform movement right now. This New Christian Right or this Christian nationalism, either Stephen Wolf's version or Doug Wilson's version, whoever's version, and a lot of discussion going on. So this is, again, this video is part of the what we would call far right Christian nationalism, probably more Stephen Wolf, and along the lines with Stephen Wolf. So yeah, I want to interact with it, but the easiest way to do it is just to let it play. So we're going to pick up where we left off. Here we go.
Honorius Augustinianus, reformers like Luther and Calvin.
All right, so he brought up Calvin. So I want to read what Calvin says about Genesis 9. And that's going to come particularly out of his commentary on Genesis. Shocker. But anyway, there's a particular section in here that could be read to agree with what Dale's saying. And remember, just to refresh your minds, I guess, I should probably have done that at the beginning. But what Dale's arguing is that the curse that Noah puts on Canaan is actually directed at Ham. So Canaan being cursed is really retroactively Ham being cursed, the father of Canaan, and therefore all of Ham's posterity are cursed in some way. And Dale's going to say that curse can be seen anecdotally through history and through the present day. So you'll see all the Hamites, those sons of Ham, either like civilizationally not being successful or being slaves or not being good leaders or not being highly intellectual. And this is all evidence of the curse of Noah put on Canaan, but actually put on Ham. So he's going to cite Calvin as agreeing with that, because he says, like, Dale's even said already that this isn't a minority opinion, that most of the church, he's listing all these names, these church fathers agree with it, and leave me alone. This is Dale talking, paraphrasing here, but leave me alone. The church has believed what I believe, and he'll even say later that Dale holds a moderate position. Hey guys, I hold a moderate position, just leave me alone. And it's like, no, actually, you don't hold. Well, one, you don't hold the church fathers' position, and it's true that there are some later that do hold Dale's position, but they would be extreme minority, and I would say Dale's is just as extreme as theirs, probably. Okay, so if you're curious, where I'm referencing is Calvin's commentary is page 305, Cursed be Canaan, where he's talking about that section of the text. All right. It is asked in the first place why Noah, instead of pronouncing the curse upon his son, inflicts the severity of punishment, which that son has deserved upon the innocent grandson, since it seems not consistent with the justice of God to visit the crimes of parents upon their children. So he's asking the question, why is Canaan cursed if it looks like Canaan didn't do anything? In the text, it looks like Ham is the one who has sinned. But the answer is well known, namely that God, although he pursues his course of judgments upon the sons and the grandchildren of the ungodly, yet in being angry with them is not angry with the innocent, because even they themselves are found in fault. This is the idea of original sin and total depravity. There is no innocent person, and so if God is judging Canaan, he's not judging an innocent person in the scheme of things. Wherefore there is no absurdity in the act of avenging the sins of the fathers upon their reprobate children, since of necessity all those whom God has deprived of his spirit are subject to his wrath. Again, total depravity. If you're not repentant, if you're sinning, if you're in your flesh, you are subject to God's wrath. So Canaan would be part of that subjugation. But it is surprising that Noah could curse his grandson. So there's an acknowledgement by Calvin that Canaan is cursed and should pass his son Ham, the author of the crime, over in silence. Calvin's going to bring up a Jewish explanation. The Jews imagine that the reason of this was to be traced to the special favor of God, and that since the Lord had bestowed upon Ham so great an honor. Now, what Calvin is probably referencing is not the blessing that Ham received or the sons of Noah received coming off disembarking the ark, but that Ham was blessed to be on the ark in the first place. Many readers of Calvin have taken that position, and it seems that Calvin is not referencing Genesis 9:1, but the fact that Ham was on the ark in the first place, because that is Ham being saved from God's judgment of the earth. But the conjecture is futile, so Calvin doesn't agree with that. Certainly, to my mind, there is no doubt that the punishment was carried forward even to his posterity, in order that the severity of it might be more apparent. So when you read that word, it's apparent to Calvin that it's not because Ham was overlooked or blessed and he couldn't do anything, but that God certainly wanted to punish Ham, but he's going to do it by going through Ham's posterity. And that might sound like, well, isn't that all of Ham's kids then? Is that all of Ham's children? Calvin hasn't told us if he agrees with that or not. He's all that he's saying at this point is that God is not overlooking Ham for his sin, but is punishing Ham by actually cursing his posterity. We don't know who yet, though. And Calvin is not suggesting that he believes that it's all of his children. He's just using the word posterity in general terms, in order that the severity of it might be more apparent, as if the Lord had openly proclaimed that the punishment of one man would not satisfy him, but that he would attach the curse also to the posterity of the offender. So God is, in Calvin's mind, God is so upset, he wants to actually curse someone of Ham's posterity so that it would go through whoever he cursed into the children of that son, to show God's ultimate disapproval and wrath here, so that it should extend through successive ages. In the meantime, Ham himself is so far from being exempt that God, by involving his son with him, aggravates his own condemnation. So there is this idea that because Ham's posterity, one of his posterity, will be cursed, it's not Ham getting away with it, or not actually being implicated in what he did, but there's probably nothing worse than seeing your children suffer for what you've done. So another question is also proposed, namely, why among the many sons of Ham? So now Calvin's going to go from the general question of why does it look like Ham didn't receive any kind of punishment, to who's the one that actually is being punished? Who's the one that Ham is going to lament over because of his sin that is going to be punished. Well, now Calvin's getting into that. Another question is also proposed, namely, why among the many sons of Ham God chooses one to be smitten. One. But let not our curiosity here indulge itself too freely. Let us remember that the judgments of God are not in vain. So Calvin's, again, is going to just refer back to the justice of God and not to question God's justice. He knows ultimately God is justice, and whatever he says is righteous and true. And so Calvin's going to fall back on that. He chooses whom he sees good, that he may show forth in them an example of his grace and kindness. Others he appoints to a different end, that they may be proofs of his anger and severity. Here, although the minds of men are blinded, let every one of us, conscious of his own infirmity, learn rather to ascribe praises to God, or praise to God's justice, than plunge with insane audacity into the profound abyss. So that's Calvin saying, trust God's judgment here, why he chooses one to be smitten. And then he makes this statement, which I would imagine is probably where Dale thinks Calvin is on his side, or Dale's on Calvin's side here somehow. While God held the whole seed of Ham as obnoxious to the curse, he mentions the Canaanites by name as those whom he would curse above all others. This is the sentence I think Dale is referencing when he invokes Calvin's name. Because it does seem here, in the sense, if you just read it, if you remove everything Calvin has just said and you just read the sentence, it sounds like Calvin suggests that all of Ham's descendants are recipients of some kind of curse. Because he says, while God held the whole seed of Abraham as obnoxious to the curse. That's a weird word. What does obnoxious mean? When you read that, it sounds like are they annoying? You know, when my toddler is screaming for no reason or singing or something, I'm like, stop, you're being obnoxious. You're just being annoying. But the definition of the word here, the Latin understanding of the word, would be more like held liable. You're held liable for something. So what Calvin is saying is, while God held the whole seed of Abraham as liable to the curse, God could have cursed, or Noah could have cursed, any one of the sons. In Calvin's mind, he mentions the Canaanites by name as those whom he would curse above all others. Now, you could see like, oh, well, above all others. Calvin says that, right? So doesn't he mean that Ham's posterity, other than the Canaanites, are cursed slightly, and then the Canaanites are cursed the most severely above all others? Now, what he's saying is above all others, meaning that the other children that were held as obnoxious to the curse were not cursed, but Canaan was. So Canaan above all others, or the Canaanites above all others, were cursed, and they're cursed with being servant of servants, or as a Hebrew idiom, meaning you are going to be you're the lowest. So unless you're reading Calvin incorrectly, it might sound like Calvin is saying, yeah, all of Ham's posterity is held obnoxious to the curse. And I'm going to nerd out again, as I always like to do. This is the Latin of Calvin's commentaries. And you might actually ask the question, why does Calvin why does the English translation use the word obnoxious? Because it's kind of a weird, like, how do we understand that word? Well, let me show you. That's bigger. Thank you. Right here is where, in the Latin, let me raise it. Here's my hand. See the white hand there? It's not the hand of Sauron or anything. But cum totum feme cam deus maledictoni obnoxium haberit. Okay, so obnoxium, that's the Latin word for held liable. That's why in the English, that's where we get the word obnoxious from. So it's just transliterated obnoxious. I'll maybe suggest like future translations of Calvin's commentaries from the Latin might use a different word, like held liable, or explain more what obnoxium means. But this is where Calvin brings up why, if all the sons could have been cursed, Canaanites, Phoebe, they're named nomen datum fumpitcus prae alis maledicterit. Above all others, cursed, right? Are maledictors. So, if anyone's curious, that's it's really hard to find the Latin of original sources are just hard to find. Oh, man. Anyway, okay. So I just wanted to show that because Calvin's not on board with this either, and it's a misreading of Calvin. He's trying to wrap the Christian mind around why is Canaan cursed when it doesn't look like he did anything. Why would God curse the children? Why would God curse one child in particular, and why not one of his other ones? Because they're all seem to be. If Canaan is innocent along with the other grandchildren of Noah, why can't they all seem to be innocent? That's all Calvin is trying to explain. But if you read it improperly, or you just read that sentence, it might sound like, yeah, well, Calvin agrees. All the children are held accountable here, and Canaan is just cursed the worst. But that's not exactly what he's saying.
Puritans like Henry Ainsworth or Matthew Poole or Matthew Henry or John Gill, and then later theologians.
I think I said this already, but Matthew Henry, of the names he's listed, is probably the closest to agreeing maybe with what Dale is suggesting. But I read Matthew. I got his commentaries back there too. You can read it. I think Dale is not reading it correctly.
Like Abraham Kuyper and R.L. Dabney, along with many others. I mean, there are so many more that I didn't include. Those are just some of the bigger names. The Glossa Ordinaria.
All right, the Glossa Ordinaria. Man, has anyone heard of this before? Before watching this video, obviously. When I watched this initially, and he brought up the Glossa Ordinaria, I hadn't heard of it. And I reached out to a couple scholars, one scholar in particular, and then one scholar in training, and I asked, "Hey, are you guys familiar at all with the Glossa Ordinaria?" And I think if you're Roman Catholic, you probably are more familiar with this because it's probably something used there or referenced there more often. But maybe just like in Protestant circles. So I'll be honest, I was not familiar with the gloss, as they like to put. As I've watched many videos on the Glossa Ordinaria, and what Dale's showing us on this video here, this title page, this cover page, is a very recent translation of it by Samuel Kupenhauve, which, if you put his name or search his name on YouTube and search the Glossa Ordinaria translation, you can watch an interview by Dr. Samuel Kupenhauve and his journey of translating the Glossa Ordinaria. But it is a 12th century document that is similar to this book. It's similar to this. Let me see here. That's this is the Reformation commentary, but it's called the Reformation commentary. But there's another one called the Ancient Commentary, and it's a compilation of church fathers throughout history that have commented or have some devotional on particular texts in Scripture. So it goes through Genesis all the way through the Tanakh and the Old Testament through the New Testament. Different church fathers comments on those verses. So the Glossa Ordinaria is an early 12th century version of that. So it does compile different church fathers. I don't necessarily like to call them commentaries because a lot of the early writings on Scripture was more devotional. So I would say like devotions on texts, and it does maybe give some insight in how they thought through these texts and what theology was being taught and whatnot. But Dale brings this up, and it's important that he brings this document up at the end of this list of names that agree with him, because this is going to have that like the heaviest weight of authority, I think, in Dale's mind. One, because it's old. We all like old things. When the older, the better, right? The older, the more authoritative. And this is 12th century, so man, this is really old. And we tend to think that it's closer to the church fathers, so we probably had a better understanding of what they thought about things. And one, that's a faulty understanding. But two, older isn't always better. And the other thing was, when I was trying to find the Glossa Ordinaria online to read it, because Dale's going to say this thing agrees with him. I wanted to see if it did. It was really hard to find. You can't, as far as I tried to, you can't find like a PDF of it. You got to order it, and I did. I ordered one right here. Glossy Ordinantia. And Dale's got a picture of it. I found plenty of like PDF pictures, like the one Dale's showing, as like, hey, here's the cover, because the cover is really cool. But he doesn't, as you'll see here, he's not going to quote it at all. He's just going to give an overview. But that's some background on the Glossa Ordinantia.
Finalized in the Middle Ages. It's a
finalized in the Middle Ages, 12th century. So like late Middle Ages.
Massive collection of early church father commentaries.
It is a massive collection. The cover that Dale showed and what I'm showing you right here is just Genesis. You see it at the bottom? This is just Genesis. So there is multi-volumes that you could buy by Dr. Samuel Klupenhava. So he's right. It is a massive compilation, but you can tell, like, as you use words like that, it's going to give it more credence, right? It's a massive compilation, a huge volume. We have exhaustive examples of church fathers agreeing with whatever Dale's saying here, right?
That codified the consensus of the early writers.
Codified the consensus of the early writers. I don't know what that means. Consensus meaning like what they all agreed on, and I guess, yeah, you could find many that would have the same thoughts on a particular text. But again, early in church history, people didn't write like academic commentaries like we would see today. Again, they're more devotional. So one author might be focusing on different devotional aspect than another. So this consensus idea, like they're all academics doing academic work and they all come to the same conclusion, is just, one, not true. And two, remember in the in the 12th century, while we did have copies and manuscripts from the early centuries, it wasn't as many as we have now. So like a book like the Ancient Commentary Collection or the Reformation Commentary Collection is going to be way more comprehensive and easier to find some kind of consensus, if that's what you're looking for, on particular understandings of text. So the Glossa, while amazing, it's cool. It's not comprehensive. We have way better works that are way more comprehensive because we found more manuscripts and stuff like that. So,
and it cemented the theological rule that Ham was the true target of the curse. In fact,
all right, it cemented the theological rule that Ham is the true target of the curse. That's the big claim there. Okay, and I think that's why he just references it and says, "Hey, it just solidifies the claim." And when he says that, he makes it sound like there's so many quotes in here on Genesis 9 and Ham that he can't, I guess, have the time to quote even one of them to you, or that it's just so clear what the fathers quoted in the gloss mean that, you know, it's just a given fact that they agree that Ham is the object of the curse. And what he means by that, again, because that language is like, what do you mean he's the object of the curse? We just read Calvin. Calvin said that is Ham being looked over, that God's just going to let the sin fly by and Ham is not affected at all by the curse? Of course, Calvin's like, of course not. Ham is definitely affected by the curse, as a father would be. What Dale means, though, is that Ham is the object, meaning through Canaan, Ham is actually cursed, and then all of Ham's children are cursed, not just Canaan. That's what he means by that. And that's what he's going to say these guys have solidified in their statements. So I'm going to read all of the church fathers listed. This is a beautiful work. You guys should get this if you can. But like this copy was like 30 something bucks. So I imagine if you got the whole Bible, it would be quite a lot. Anyway, I'm going to read all of the church fathers' commentary here, starting like in verse when Ham gets drunk, the commentary on that. So this is Al Suan's commentary on drinking of the wine. Christ also was inebriated while he suffered, and naked while crucified in his tent. In his tent, he's quoting the verse when Noah was in his tent. In his tent, that is The morality of his flesh was laid bare among the household members of his blood. Next quote, unto the Jews a stumbling block, and unto the Gentiles foolish. You see the devotional bend here for Alcuin when he's looking at these texts. Called both Jews and Greeks, and though Shem and Japheth, the power of God and the wisdom of God, for the foolishness of God is wiser than men. Perhaps Noah became drunk after the flood because he did not know that wine caused intoxication. That's actually a very common belief, that Noah didn't mean to get drunk. He just hadn't had wine in a long time. And he's like, wow, I'm a lightweight. We do not read anywhere that men used wine before the flood. That is why Scripture specifies that Noah planted a vineyard. The nakedness of the thigh follows drunkenness, similar to how lust follows satiety. Yeah. Here's what Isidore says. The Jews cast insult upon seeing the death of Christ, but Shem and Japheth, the two delivering peoples of circumcision and uncircumcision, covered him while turned away so that they would not see. This is one part of the story where Japheth and Shem cover their father's nakedness. So too we cover the passion of Christ with a certain vestment by honoring the sacrament. You see the devotionalness here? By returning a reason for this mystery, we cover the slander of the Jews. The vestment signifies the sacrament. Their backs signify the memory of past things. For the passion has already been accomplished and was no longer to be looked forward to in the future. Ham saw, because he consented to the murder of the Lord, he told without, because through him what was secret in prophecy was made manifest. Because the nation of the Jews, which is a chest for the Christians, bears the law and prophets as a witness of the church, so that we may honor through sacrament what the nation announces in the letter. Now, of course, he says Ham here, right? He mentions Ham because it is Ham's son who is cursed, and of course, it is Ham's sin that causes Canaan to be cursed. So that's why Ham is usually referenced when addressing what befalls his posterity, as Calvin has told us also. All right, this is continuing with Isidore. Heretics occupy a cursed middle position because they are not recognized in the wall comprised of those from the circumcised who believe, to which the apostles belong, nor are they in the wall of the uncircumcised, wherein the Gentiles have joined together in the unity of faith, as though in the peace of the cornerstone. So, not much there on the curse of Cain. Here's Gregory on but Shem, when Shem turned away, or Shem and Japheth covered Noah. We are said to turn away from that which we reject. What is meant by the sons coming in with averted looks, with a cloak thrown over their backs, and covering the nakedness of their father? What could this mean, except that when good subjects are displeased with the evils of their rulers, they conceal these things lest they become known to others? With averted looks, they bring in a covering, because judging the deed and revering the office, they do not wish to look upon what they are concealing. Now, here's some particular commentaries on cursed be Canaan, part of the text where it says cursed be Canaan. This is Gregory again. In Moralia, book 26, God does not overlook our many sins, but begins here the judgment for the sake of our correction, so that it might cease when the reprobate are condemned. Judgment begins at the house of God, 1 Peter 4:17. What then will be the end of those who do not believe and who do not experience temporal lashes? They will perish for eternity. Their wickedness is signified by the sin of Ham, to whom is said, cursed be Canaan, a servant, etc. With the father sinning, the son receives the sentence, because the wickedness of the reprobate has long-lasting effects here, but perishes hereafter. So again, acknowledging the sin of Ham, but the curse being on Canaan, not the curse being on Ham and everybody and all of his children. Blessed be the God of Shem. So this continuing down the text, I think this is still Gregory. Although God is over all nations, even the Gentiles call him a special sense the God of Israel. Through the Gentiles, the church has occupied the whole of the world. This was announced in advance when it was said, may God enlarge Japheth. Canaan. This is Strabo, from whom the Canaanites who are foretold in this curse that they will be expelled from that place of habitation. So this is he basically saying the curse is the Canaanites being removed from the land that we read in Joshua. Well, the end of Deuteronomy into Joshua. Here's Jerome. May God enlarge Japheth. The Hebrews are from Shem and the Gentiles from Japheth, because the multitude of believers is wide. It receives the name enlargement from the breath which is called in Hebrew Japheth. Scripture says, may he dwell in the tents of Shem. This is a prophecy about us who will dwell in the learning and knowledge of the Scriptures after Israel has been cast out. Here's Isidore on may God enlarge Japheth and bless Shem. Shem, older by birth as himself, the Jewish population, which came the patriarchs, prophets, and apostles. Japheth is the father of Gentiles, and his name means enlargement. For the population of believers was enlarged by the Gentiles, who, with the prophets and apostles, accepted the inheritance. And the dwelling of Japheth crossed over to the tent of Seth. That is to say, the church is justified in the house of the law and prophets. Although the church is younger, it is greater by the law of grace. Ham, whose name means hot, is separated from both. He is neither among the first fruits of the Israelites nor among the plenitude of the Gentiles. He signifies both Jews and heretics who are hot, and not with the spirit of wisdom, but with impatience. For this reason, such people are accustomed to rage and disturb the saints. Ham also signifies all false Christians who profess the passion of Christ in word, but dishonor it by their evil living. By their fruits you shall know them. Matthew 7:16. Ham is not cursed in himself. That's important. Ham is not cursed in himself, but his son, as though in his fruit, that is, in his work. Canaan means their movement, i.e., their work. So it's amazing the devotional attachments that these early fathers are gonna attach to the names and what they signify for Christians. Of course, Isidore is gonna suggest that Ham are rebelling Jews, and therefore like rebelling Christians, or Christians that lie, that aren't reverent to what's come before them and take God's promises and abuse them, or not reverent with them. And even he goes into the names of Ham and Canaan, right? Meaning their movement, their work. So Canaan being Ham's work is the one that is being cursed. But you notice that Isidore specifically makes the point that it's not Ham who's cursed, it's Canaan who's cursed. Just a couple more. I know this is a long portion, but man, 32 minutes? You got to be kidding me. I read so slow. These are the generations. The two sons of Noah blessed. Who is this? Oh, this is still Isidore. The two sons of Noah blessed, and the middle one cursed. So there you go. So if you take that by itself, that statement, the two sons of Noah blessed, and the middle one cursed. Their generations are set forth, from whom arise 72 generations. You would say, well, see, Ham is cursed. He just said it, right? But you have to read what Isidore said right before that. Noah or Ham is not exempt from the curse because he is the father of Canaan. So he is affected by it, and it is his sin that causes it. So yeah, he's absolutely affected. And when you use Ham as like a synecdoche, when I say like, yeah, Ham is the only line that has a curse in it of the three kids. Like that's all he's doing when he says that two are not cursed, but one is. Their generations, or what two sons of Noah blessed and the middle one cursed, their generations are set forth. It's not suggesting that Ham is the one that received the curse, but it's Ham and his posterity, being Canaan, that received the curse. That's the only line that is cursed. That's all it's saying. Last two, Alcuin again. They think he obtained Asia, or Ham, or not Ham, sorry, Shem. Alcuin, they think he obtained Asia, Ham, Africa, and Japheth, Europe. And then Alcuin says this about Japheth. This is the younger son from whom is born 7 sons who occupy the northern region of Tarsus and Amanus and the mountains of Cilicia and Syria as far as the river Don. So that's it. So we have like four church fathers, I think. Let's see. We have Gregory, we have Jerome, we have Alcuin, we have Isidore. That's it. Those are all who are quoted on Genesis 9 in regards to the curse. So what I want to show, one, is the claim that this is like a consensus or something, like this is a slam dunk case to prove Dale right is not correct at all. The ancient commentaries have more church father quotes than that does, and even the quotes that I read to you aren't conclusive that they think that Ham is the object of the curse, meaning through Canaan it's actually Ham that's cursed and all his posterity. It's actually the opposite. They do see Ham as the cursed line because Canaan's cursed in that line, but they see the Canaanites as the one that are experiencing the outcome or the workings of that curse, meaning they will become either slaves of Israel, which they do. The Gibeonites become slaves, or they're removed from the land, and that is the curse playing out. And I also say too that if you read Calvin's commentary, he does get into the paradox or the inconsistency of what seems like the curse not playing out, because if you understand Mesopotamian history, the Canaanites become very powerful. You even see this in Numbers and Deuteronomy when God commands Israel to go into the land, and then Israel sends the spies out, and they spy out the land where the Canaanites are, and they come back terrified because there's giants there, and you have huge walls and economies and armies. They're very organized, and civilizationally they're very advanced. Israel is like the backwater people, right, that got released from Egypt that really have nothing. The Canaanites are not slaves of anybody. They are masters of the land, it looks like. They have giants there. So it's the power of course, and that's important because God wants to show his power over the mighty. God can, whatever God says he's going to do, and he's even going to use wimpy Israel, who have just been slaves, to do that. So the curse doesn't even play out immediately, and that drives another problem in this whole worldview that Dale's giving us, because he's going to say, well, anecdotally, and like if you look back in history, this curse is true. It's like, well, if that curse is true, it should always be true, but there are times when it's not, and so if the curse was a civilizational one, Canaan should never have arisen to its apex like it did before it came crashing down. And not because the Israelites were smarter or more technologically advanced. It was exactly really the opposite. They were cowards who had trumpets and walked around Jericho, 7 times for 7 days, and then the walls fall down. So it's only after God wipes them out, really. Ultimately, that's the whole point. That's why the ark goes first. God is saying, I'm the one that fights your battles, not you, because the Canaanites are powerful. That's the whole point. So unless you want to say like the curse starts then or something, but Dale doesn't bring that up, I'm going way off track from the the glossa ordinantia. But anyway, we'll continue a little bit longer, then we'll stop.
In fact, it claimed that human slavery was introduced into the world solely because of Ham's specific sin against parental authority.
I haven't read that. If he means, is it because Ham's sin that the Israelites were taken as slaves, because the Egyptians, being Hamites, like love slavery, or like they are the originators of slavery? Did they begin slavery and then therefore they become enslaved because they started it? I'm not sure what that means.
In other words, this isn't some like fringe position. In fact, I would say that I hold a moderate view compared to much of church history.
That statement to me has no bearing. Great. I'm glad you think that, Dale. But you're not in line with anything that I've read. All of the evidence you've provided so far of who agrees with you or who you are aligning yourself with has not aligned themselves with you. None of them have. So it is a fringe position. You haven't given us any clear evidence that you are in some kind of majority position. early church majority position, I guess.
And it was widely held throughout much of the early church, the medieval church, in the Reformation era, and even into the pre-1900 time of American history.
See, this is like, man. So again, this is the argument that this is what the early church believed up until the modern day, but everything I've read to you, which was before the modern day, has not proven Dale's point.
Now, the reason the curse of Ham is so intensely rejected is that we live under an egalitarian liberal regime, treats the mere acknowledgement of any distinctions regarding superiority or inferiority, whether that's between the sexes or the races, as some type of moral evil.
The art world has
Okay, that's a good place to stop because this is for profit. Now they're going to have commercials. This to me, man, when we read of the Gospels, when Jesus goes to the temple and there's marketplaces set up in the temple that are selling like pigeons and stuff, so the Jews can go into the temple and offer their sacrifices, and Jesus comes in like enraged and knocking over tables. It is said that my Father's house is a house of prayer, and you make it a den of robbers. Stuff like this. I think this is what that looks like in the modern day. Like, why are we having commercials selling products? What Dale's giving us is supposed to be this monumental truth that is supposed to fix our worldview, and then by the way, buy some art. Oh, by the way, buy some Christian art so you can like rebuild the Christian, so you can be acceptable and consecrated to God. Bring back our Christian values. It's like, well, dude, get your booze out of the way in God's temple. Like, I don't understand this.
completely abandoned beauty. What used to point people.
Anyway, so there you go. There's the man himself, Joel Webben, who probably brought Dale aboard this idea and is using Dale as a spokesperson for it. And then let's see, we'll pick it back. Man, I got through like nothing. This is always the problem when you're trying to show the sources. It's just not possible to be concise, or at least I'm not able to make it concise. Maybe it's possible for others, but unless you just throw assertions out, and I hate doing that. And I mean, I have. Sometimes you just have to, and then maybe you can list the resources to find where I make my assertions from. But when you actually dig into people's assertions and you try to explain them and show them, it just takes forever. And we haven't even gotten to like the really crazy parts yet. This is just still the beginning. So I hope you found this informative. Hopefully, like if anyone wants to invoke Calvin or anyone else that wants to be on their side, or you get some obscure document like the Glossa Ordinencia, you can say like, well, it's not as robust for your argument as you're making it sound. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.